There is a specific kind of frustration that happens when your proven methods start to fail. Suddenly it's not about what you know, but where you are in your learning journey. Today we're going to explore 6 concepts that uncover your position in this learning shift. You know the struggle, now it's time to find the next step. In every discipline, there are specific ideas that act like portals. Jan Mayer and Ray Land called these threshold concepts. Unlike most pieces of information that are simply added to your knowledge bank, threshold concepts are transformative. They are often troublesome to learn because it clashes with your current worldview, but once you grasp it, it's irreversible. You cannot unknow it, and you can't go back to seeing the world the way that you saw it before. When you encounter a threshold concept, your position as a learner shifts from stable to unstable. You enter the liminal space, the doorway between the old understanding and the new. This is a state of stuckness, and it feels like cognitive dissonance. You might feel like you've hit a plateau or that you're losing ground. This confusion isn't a sign of failure. It's the feeling of your brain dismantling the old simplified model to make room for a more complex reality. Once you cross the threshold, your position changes again. You are no longer looking at the concept, you're looking through it. The knowledge becomes integrative, tying together dozens of previously disconnected facts. To lead your learning, when you feel stuck in a subject, it's important to stop trying to memorize more facts. Instead, ask yourself, what is the one concept here that I find the most counterintuitive or weird? This is likely your threshold. Embrace the liminality. Recognize the feeling of being lost is a necessity of deep learning. Sit with the troublesome knowledge, rather than reaching for a simplified shortcut that keeps you outside of the portal. When you are helping others to lead their learning, as a leader or a mentor, your job is not to make the learning easy, it's to make it attainable. Explicitly tell your team when they are approaching a threshold concept. Warn them. The next section is going to feel confusing and frustrating for a while. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. Transformative learning, pioneered by Jack Mezirow, is not about adding more information to your brain. Instead, it's about changing the very architecture of how you see the world. It focuses on our meaning perspectives, the filters of belief and assumption we've inherited from our culture, education, and upbringing. Most learning is additive, but transformational learning is reconstructive. It is the process of examining those filters, finding them inadequate, and consciously building a more inclusive, open, and flexible way of thinking. This can also link quite strongly with paradigmatic assumptions, which we'll also talk about in this video. This process really happens during business as usual. It's almost always triggered by a disorientating dilemma. A crisis where your current worldview fails to explain a new experience or solve a new problem. It feels like a loss of stable ground. When our perspectives are tied to our identity, having these challenged actually almost feels like personal failure. You might experience shame, frustration, or a deep sense of unknown. You might even find that it's the very things that you knew before that are actually the thing preventing you from seeing a solution. Essentially, it's the messy middle, where the old version of you is gone, but the new version hasn't been built yet. The breakthrough occurs when you move from habitual action, doing things because that's how you've always done them, to reflective action. You stop becoming a passive recipient of your own beliefs and become the architect instead. This deepens learning because it makes it self-correcting. Instead of just getting better at the task itself, you actually get better at learning. You become more comfortable with ambiguity and more adept at integrating conflicting information. You aren't just a practitioner with a new skill, you're a practitioner with a new identity. To lead your transformative learning, it requires you to become a detective of your own assumptions. Audit those emotional triggers. When you encounter a problem that makes you angry or frustrated, don't just simply rush to solve that external problem. Stop and ask, what deeply held belief of mine is being challenged right now? That emotional friction is a sign that a disorientating dilemma is ready to be processed. And also actively look for perspectives that clash with your own. Don't just read to confirm what you know. Read to find where your current understanding meets its limitations. To lead others through the transformation, you must assist in provoking new ideas. Engineer constructive friction. That means, instead of giving them a how-to manual, give them a problem that their current common sense cannot solve. When the dilemma hits, don't step in to save them immediately. Allow them to wrestle with it. Stephen Brookfield argues that the heart of critical reflection is the hunt for the assumptions that govern our actions. We often operate in what we call common sense, but Brookfield suggested that this is usually a collection of unexamined beliefs. He categorizes these into 3 types. Paradigmatic assumptions, the hardest to see. These are your fundamental how the world works beliefs, i.e., Deep learning only happens through struggle. Prescriptive assumptions. What we think should be happening in a given environment. For example, a good leader should always have a clear answer. And causal assumptions. Beliefs about how to bring about a specific result. For instance, if I give a clear rubric, then students will produce high quality work. To shift from naive practice to critically reflective practice, you must move your position. You cannot find your own assumptions by simply thinking harder. You need to look at your work through 4 different lenses. The autobiographical lens. You look backward at your own history as a learner. How did your education shape what you find normal or acceptable? The client's lens. You look at yourself through the eyes of those you serve. This reveals the hidden curriculum, the messages you are sending that you didn't intend to. For example, you think you're being flexible, but they actually see you as unorganized. The colleague's lens. You check your common sense against the experience of your peers. This breaks the isolation of practice and reveals where you might be caught in groupthink, or a stagnant view of what you've always done. And the theoretical literature lens. You look at your experience through academic frameworks. This provides labels for your struggles, helping you to realize that your personal failures are often documented systemic patterns. By using these lenses, you move from a position of where things just happen to developing agency. You begin to see how ideas that have served you and others previously might not actually work in the way that you'd previously believed. To lead your own learning, you must become a hunter of your own prescriptive and causal assumptions. Take a recent frustration and write down the causal assumption behind it. For example, I assumed that if I did this, then the team would do this. And consult the literature, don't just ruminate. Find a theory or framework, like the ones we're discussing today, that speaks to your specific frustration. The theoretical lens acts as a circuit breaker for negative self-talk by providing an objective, structural explanation for your experience. And as a leader, your job is to provide the lenses for your team. Normalize assumption hunting. In meetings, help others to uncover their causal assumptions in their own practice. If I do this a particular way, I get this result might highlight a stagnant approach to a problem that needs revising and updating. And create structured opportunities for your team to see themselves through the client's eyes. Use anonymous feedback loops or stop, start, continue surveys. By making the data from these lenses public and safe to discuss, you move the team from a culture of blame to a culture of critical reflection. Your goal is to help them see that being a good practitioner isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. The Protégé Effect is a psychological phenomenon where the mere expectation of teaching actually leads to better learning and higher retention. It's not just about the act of talking, it's about the mental shift that occurs when you become responsible for another person's understanding. The Feynman technique is a practical implementation of this effect. Named after physicist Richard Feynman, it's a mental model designed to strip away the illusion of competence. It requires you to take a complex idea and strip it down to plain, simple language, in a way that you could explain it to a 10-year-old. If you have to use a big word or a technical jargon to make your point, then it shows that you haven't mastered the concept yet. The framework fundamentally changes your position in the learning process. As a student, your position is downstream. You're the recipient of information, often mistaking recognition, I've seen this before, for recall. I can explain this from scratch. When you shift into the teacher role, your position moves upstream. You are now responsible. The shift feels more cognitively demanding because it forces you to build the bridges between ideas yourself, rather than just walking across the ones someone else has built for you. You start to anticipate questions, look for logical gaps, and organize information into a hierarchy of importance. Another key advantage to using the Feynman technique is that you ruthlessly expose your own expert bias. The curse of knowing so much that you can no longer see where a beginner would get lost. This deepens learning by building a robust, flexible mental model. You move from fluency, knowing the name of something, to mastery, knowing how the thing actually works. To lead your own learning, you must become your own most difficult student. Don't just think you understand the concept. Write a one-page explanation for a non-expert. Each time you reach for a technical term, stop. Force yourself to describe the mechanism of the term using only common words. And as a leader, you can leverage the Protégé Effect to help accelerate your team's development. The no jargon briefing. During team meetings, ask a colleague to explain a recent project or complex concept to the group, with one rule. They cannot use any industry-specific acronyms or jargon. This forces them to process their information at a deeper conceptual level. Even if they don't actually deliver the lecture, give your learners the expectation of teaching. Say, I want you to research this topic because you'll be the one running the briefing next week. Research shows that the preparation for teaching is often where the most significant learning gains happen. Your goal is to move them from being users of information to owners of it. Lev Vygotsky's Zone of Proximal Development is the distance between what a learner can do independently and what they can achieve with the guidance of a more knowledgeable other. It suggests that our actual level of development, what we can do alone, is a poor predictor of future growth. The real learning happens in the gap. If a task is inside your current achievement, you are merely practicing what you already know. If it is too far outside your zone of proximal development, then you'll find that inherent difficulty of the task prevents you from making progress. Learning is the act of standing right on the edge of your current competence. In this framework, your position is defined by the relationship to the support. The support is known as scaffolding. When you're in the zone of proximal development, the learning feels comfortably hard. You aren't drowning, but you're not coasting either. The shift occurs when the more knowledgeable other provides just enough structure, a hint, a framework, or a simplified step to allow you to complete a task you couldn't do 5 minutes ago. You're positioned for success not because of your own brainpower, but because of the supports that you have around you. Understanding the zone of proximal development changes how you view ability. We often think about intelligence as being a fixed volume within our heads. The zone of proximal development reveals that intelligence is actually a potential that is realized through social and environmental interaction. This deepens learning by removing the solo genius myth. You realize that mastery isn't just about being able to solve everything in a vacuum. It's about knowing how to navigate the distance between your current self and your potential self using the right tools and people. To lead your own learning, you must become an expert at where the edge is for you and who the right people are to help you beyond that. If you're feeling bored, you've moved back into the area of current achievement. If you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, you've jumped past your zone of proximal development into the panic zone. When you're stuck, don't look for the full answer. Look for a more knowledgeable other, a mentor, a forum, or even an AI tool, and ask for the smallest possible hint to get you moving again. As a leader or educator, your job is to be the scaffolder in chief. A common mistake is to over-scaffold, providing too much help, too much support. Providing so much in a way that the learner never actually enters the zone of proximal development. Effective leadership requires you to provide the support that scaffolds. It must be there when they struggle, and it must fade away as they gain confidence. Traditional education treats the brain like a container that's filled with just-in-case knowledge. Connectivism and Rhizomatic learning argue that in a world where information is exploding and changing rapidly, the container is less relevant. Instead, we must treat learning as a series of pipelines. Connectivism suggests that knowledge exists within the network itself, while Rhizomatic learning suggests that the path through that network is non-linear, unpredictable, and has no expert center. The fundamental shift that occurs with this is instead of knowing what, it's knowing where. The experience of this, that it moves from a place of certainty to a place of fluidity. It requires giving up the idea that you can, or should, master everything internally. It feels like you're outsourcing your memory to a network. Instead of trying to own the knowledge, you position yourself in close proximity to the people, databases, and AI tools that hold the most current information. You become a node rather than a container. Understanding this means realizing that in high-stakes, fast-moving fields, the textbooks is always out of date. The only way to stay relevant is to participate in the rhizome, the organic, messy, real-time negotiation of knowledge that happens in communities of practice. This deepens learning by focusing on currency. You stop wasting cognitive load on memorizing static facts and start using it to evaluate the quality of your connections. You learn to traverse the network, finding the most reliable nodes to help solve the problem at hand. To lead your own learning in this space, you must shift your focus from content to connectivity. Don't just follow experts, follow the discussions. Use tools that help to source high-quality information, feeds, specialized forums, AI-driven research tools. Your personal learning network is your most valuable learning asset. Practice just-in-time navigation. Instead of trying to learn a software or theory just in case, practice the skill of finding the exact node you need the moment a problem arises. This means that your success is defined by the speed of that connection, as opposed to the depth of your internal storage. As a leader, your role changes from content provider to network curator. Instead of a rigid linear curriculum, provide a rhizomatic environment. Give your team a complex real-world problem and the resources to solve it, but let them find their own path through the network. This also means that you can focus on the connections within your team. Use platforms where knowledge can be shared horizontally rather than top-down. Your goal is to build a community where the collective intelligence of the network is always greater than the sum of the individuals. You are leading them to a place where they don't need to have the answer, because they have the network.